So, do you have a mentor, a coach, someone who's inspired you with your life, someone who's helped you along the way? I know in my life, I've been so very fortunate to have so many people who have shaped my life, who have influenced me, have mentored me, have helped me along the way. And to be honest, most of them were people that I knew up close and personal. But there have been some people in my life who have so shaped me and inspired me and challenged me that I've never met. And one of those people actually is Eugene Peterson. I've been reading the biography of Eugene Peterson, A Burning in My Bones by Win Collier. It's an excellent read. I'm almost completely through with this read. And I'm telling you, Eugene Peterson's influence on my life, it caused me to think about his influence and the way he's mentored me in my life as a pastor and a teacher. As a matter of fact, there's no way I can actually adequately explain to you what he has meant to me across the years. I will tell you this, that in my 40s, I wasn't sure if I wanted to stay in the active pastorate or not. It's not because I didn't love the place that I was. I was at Locust Grove and I loved the people. It's that somehow along the way I had lost the adventure of what it was to try to be a pastor, to really try to provide spiritual care for people and what that meant. And so it was actually a trip that I'd made to Swanee, my go-to place across all these years. I'd gone to hike the Fiery Gizzard, which would have been a typical escape day for me. I'd do that in the morning, then I'd go find a bite of lunch, and then I'd go hide away in the library at Swanee. I'd go to their theological library on the third floor of that library, and all these just rows and rows of books, and it so appealed to me across the years. I found so much comfort there, and I stumbled across some of Eugene Peterson's writing about being a pastor, and it immediately I was hooked on Peterson. So I thought I would do something a little different with tonight, and maybe next week as well. I want to take some of his writings, things that he's written about, and then I want to offer my own reflection, my own observation about what it is to be a pastor or a teacher, and trying to live in that vocation for all these years. So, in an age when pastoring, and I wrote this on a post the other night, in an age when pastoring is often marginalized as something that's unimportant or as something only the charismatic mega church leader maybe should do, Peterson provides this quiet, deep, beautiful example of what it means to live as an authentic person and as a pastor. As a matter of fact, his very life provides this canvas of someone who lived a flawed. He was no perfect man. It becomes obvious. He'd given his biographer the right to look into his journals, his own personal journals. Who does that? And allowed his biographer to plow through those journals to see the truth of his own life. He was not a perfect man by any way. He was very flawed, and he was very, very human. And yet, somehow, his life becomes this beautiful example of what it is to be both authentic and human, striving to be holy, to live into that sense of being holy as a flawed human being. And so I want to share with you some of what Peterson wrote and why it's so appealing to me and why I think he knew something about pastoring that not only can be helpful to me, but may be helpful to you. You obviously, most of you are not going to be someone who feels a call to pastoring, but maybe it'll help you understand that role and maybe your own call as a Christian to live in the world. At the same time, I'm still struggling with a problem with my voice, so bear with me. So I wanted to read, I'm not going to read a whole lot to you, but I'll read some. I wanted to read from one of Eugene Peterson's journals. This is what he wrote. Lord Jesus, I thank you for a life well lived, pastoral vocation done well, books well written, marriage, children, regent, where he taught. He was a university professor as well. But right now, he wrote, I feel so flawed and inadequate. Heal my memories, restore me, create in me a clean heart. Eugene Peterson was a man who was a very gifted writer, a wonderful pastor, an excellent teacher. And yet, at the very core of his being was this desire to live more deeply into his own spiritual life and calling. He was never really quite satisfied with the point in which he had arrived. He always was searching for and looking for the kind of vocational center, the core of his own life, a place he would have deemed holy in his life. And yet he held together this sense of being human and holy at the same time in a very authentic way. There was not much pretense in Eugene Peterson's life, and he was authentic. And I always admired that in his writing. I certainly admired it in his life, and I've tried to emulate that, especially in these, growing up, becoming more mature as an adult, and moving toward, as I move even toward the years ahead, I want to live more deeply into that aspect of being both human and authentic and holy at the same time. And I don't mean holy in the sense of otherworldly, as being someone who is, can finally claim they have ultimately reached perfection. I don't believe that to be biblical holiness to begin with. We're all scarred. We're all broken. And we all have feet of clay. We're all very human. But we also, I think, have in us this hungering to live more at the core of who God called us to be. So I wanted to share with you some of the writings, some of the books that he has written across the years. I can tell you this: I have kind of two sets of books with me. These are from my study. These books were books that I found early. Now, the first books that I read of his were library books. I finally went in and bought the books myself. And then, so these were from his earlier years. Most of these written in his earlier years. He would have been a pastor when he wrote most of these. Then he did a work with the Bible. Maybe you've heard of it, called The Message. Yeah, of course, I have my own copies here. I have one here that I've about, I guess, worn out. I don't say that in any pious way. It's just I have. I love the language. I love the way the way he has tried to take and interpret the Bible in the vernacular of people who would that he would have known to sit in the church, in his church where he pastored. He wanted the Bible to be relatable, to be readable, to be understandable for people. And so he worked with the languages. He was obviously he was a master at both Greek and Hebrew and Aramaic. He knew the languages well, and thus we ended up with what's known as now The Message. I'll share some of that with you in closing about that. So he wrote most of these, then translated the Bible into The Message. And then later, these are all books that probably came from courses, most of them from courses that he taught in seminary. I'll get to these next week. I'm not even going to try. I'm not even going to try this week. So what could I share with you? What could I share with you? Excuse me. That would be helpful. Well, let me find, I'm going to find this one. I'm going to start with, I may not even get out of this one. This book is called The Contemplative Pastor. And I just wanted to read a couple of things about his understanding of what it is to be a pastor. He talks about how we often in the ministry talk about how busy we are and how easy it is for busyness to not just seep into our life, but take us over. He did not view busyness in the ministry, in the pastorate, as a good thing at all. He saw it as an enemy of a spiritual life. He believed it was not a matter of overcommitment either. He believed it was a matter of laziness on the part of those of us who are doing vocationally pastoral work. That we often abdicated the responsibility we had to do what's really important as a pastor, and we instead turned into CEOs of trying to manage an organization rather than doing the hard work of spiritual work as a pastor. And so this is what he wrote. He wrote this about being busy. Excuse me. He said, "I am busy because I am lazy. I indolently let others decide what I will do instead of deciding myself. I let people who do not understand the work of the pastor write the agenda for my day's work because I am too slipshod to write it myself." Well, you know, what a interesting way to talk about the work of the pastor. He goes on to say it was a favorite theme of C.S. Lewis that only lazy people work hard. By lazily abdicating the essential work of deciding and directing, establishing values and setting goals, other people do it for us. And then we find ourselves frantically at the last minute trying to satisfy a half dozen different demands on our time, none of which is essential to our vocation, to stave off the disaster of disappointing someone. And so his understanding of the pastorate was one that you had to create margin, space, time to guard your own soul, to take care of yourself, to live a deep and authentic life with God, to have something of a presence to share with others with his life. And that so, well, it so helped me at a time in my life when I had allowed busyness to take over my life and trying to maybe meet the needs, or not just the needs, but expectations of people, when in reality I was ignoring what was probably essential, what was needed out of me as a person and as a pastor. And so I really appreciated him writing about this. Another aspect he wrote about this is about being subversive. Listen to what he says. "As a pastor, I don't like being viewed as nice but insignificant. I bristle when a high-energy executive leaves the place of worship with the comment, 'This was wonderful, Pastor, but now we have to go back to the real world, don't we?' I had thought we were in the most real world, the world revealed as God's, a world believed to be invaded by God's grace and turning on the pivot of Christ's crucifixion and resurrection. The executive's comments brings me up short. He isn't taking this seriously. Excuse me. Worshiping God is marginal to making money. Prayer is marginal to the bottom line. Christian salvation is a brand preference. I bristle and want to assert my importance. I want to force the recognition of the key position I hold in the economy of God and his economy, if he only knew it. And then I remember that I am a subversive. My long-term effectiveness depends on my not being recognized for who I really am. If he realized that I actually believe the American way of life is doomed to destruction and that another kingdom is right now being formed in secret to take its place, he wouldn't be pleased at all. If he knew what I was really doing and the difference it was making, he would fire me." That's Peterson talking about the subversive nature of a pastor's work. And I'll talk later at some other point in more detail about that aspect, because I believe it to be so true and so adequately described that the work itself, by nature of what we do, is subversive. Jesus was very subversive. He often told parables, and that was a very subversive act of his time. So, Peterson reminded me of all of that. He caused me to set up and take note and begin to think about the work that I'm doing, and that even in the moments when maybe it felt like no one was listening, or it felt like somehow, You know that the kingdom was being pushed aside by the culture that we're a part of, that the God that we know and serve and love is a God that is far larger than any of that. And we just have to keep at it, that we have to be faithful, that we have to keep doing what we can do. And he reminded me that that's often the work of a pastor. I'll tell a couple more. I wanted to share this one with you. I want to talk with you. He wrote about problems and mystery, and I want to share this with you. In running a church, he wrote, I solve problems. Wherever two or three are gathered together, problems develop. Egos are bruised, procedures get gnarled, arrangements become confused, plans go awry, temperaments clash. There are polity problems, marriage problems, work problems, child problems, committee problems, emotional problems. Someone has to interpret, explain, work out new plans, develop better procedures, organize, and administer. Most pastors like to do this. I know I do. It's satisfying to help make the rough places smooth. The difficulty, he writes, is that problems arrive in such a constant flow that problem solving becomes full-time work. Because it is useful and the pastor ordinarily does it well, we fail to see that the pastoral vocation has been subverted. Gabriel Marcel wrote that life is not so much a problem to be solved as a mystery to be explored. That is certainly the biblical stance. Life is not something we manage to hammer together and keep it in repairs by our wits. It is an unfathomable gift. We are immersed in mysteries. Incredible love, confounding evil, the creation, the cross, grace, and God. What a great reminder for me at a point in my life that life is not a problem to be solved, that it is a mystery. It is a mystery to be explored with our life. And my work as a pastor, and based on personality as well, I would so like to fix the problems that I see or that someone presents me with. But I have learned across the years that you can't fix someone else's problems. You can't even fix your own problems, nor can I fix mine. That in many ways, at the very core of everything, there's a sense of mystery. I mean, our very lives are mysteries to us, let alone the life of others that we know and love. We all remain a bit of a mystery, and that mystery is to be explored. And a pastor's work is about paying attention to the mystery, giving space to it, hearing other people grapple with their own issues and their own life without trying to be so quick to rush in with answers. When I was young as a pastor, I thought when someone presented me with a question or a problem that I was either supposed to fix it or answer it. These days, I'd rather just be able to be present and listen carefully and then try and somehow open a door that explains that life is more a mystery, and that mystery can be explored and maybe even enjoyed, but you're never going to solve all the problems and you're never going to answer all the questions, and we shouldn't try. And it was Peterson who taught me that in his work. I'll share one more, and I'll quit for tonight. He's got a chapter, and this is from the book, The Contemplative Pastor, about entering the wreckage. He says this: take a long look at the sheer quantity of wreckage around us. Wrecked bodies, wrecked marriages, wrecked careers, wrecked plans, wrecked families, wrecked alliances, wrecked friendships, wrecked prosperity. We avert our eyes. We try not to dwell on it. We whistle in the dark. We wake up in the morning hoping for health and love and justice and success. We build quick mental and emotional defenses against the inrush of bad news, and we try to keep our hopes up. And then another kind of crash puts us or someone we care about in a pile of wreckage. Newspapers document the ruins with photographs and headlines. Our own hearts and journals fill the details. Are there any promises, any hopes exempt from the general carnage? Doesn't seem so. And pastors walk into these ruins every day. Why do we do it? What do we hope to accomplish? After all these centuries, things don't seem to have gotten much better. Do we think that another day's effort is going to stay the avalanche to doomsday? Why do we not all become cynics? Is it sheer naivete that keeps some pastors investing themselves in acts of compassion, inviting people to a life of sacrifice, suffering abuse in order to witness to the truth, stubbornly repeating an old, hard to believe, and much denied story of good news in the midst of bad news? Is our talk of citizenship in the kingdom of God anything that can be construed as the real world? Or are we passing on a spiritual fiction analogous to the science fictions that fantasize a better world than we will ever live in? Is pastoral work mostly a matter of putting plastic flowers on people's drab lives? Well-intentioned attempts to brighten a bad scene, not totally without use, but not real in any substantive or literal sense? And this is what he writes. There are many people who think so, and most pastors have moments when they think so. But if we think so often enough, we slowly begin to adopt the majority opinion and shape our work to the expectations of a people for whom God is not so much a person as a legend, who suppose that the kingdom will be wonderful once we get past Armageddon, but we had best work right now on the terms that this world gives us, and who think that the good news is nice the way greeting card verse is nice, but in no way necessary to everyday life in the way that a computer manual or a job description is. Maybe that wouldn't mean a lot to you, I don't know, but I tell you, for me, when I first came across it, I realized he's right. Typically, not always, but typically when people come to see me as a pastor, they don't come by to tell me that it's the best day of their life, that it's been a tremendous week, or that they've gotten a raise or a promotion. That's not usually the way it works. Usually when people come to see me or any other pastor, it's because they've bumped into some limitation. They've experienced what Peterson was talking about, the wreckage of life. And so pastors, excuse me, by nature of calling, not only are to bear witness to this and be present, but at the same time find hope and share grace with people. I know some people think that a preacher's job is to preach hellfire and brimstone. There's still some of that out there. And some people believe that a pastor's job is to point out the wrongs, sins, and condemn people when they are in the wrong. And there is certainly a place for prophetic words and actions on the part of pastors. But on the whole, that's not what most people need. Most people, when they are broken, don't need someone else to tell them, boy, you really messed up. They need someone who will listen, who will love them, who will hold out hope and grace for them. At its best, that is a pastor's work. Yeah, there's a lot that's been written about and said about how churches are changing, and God knows churches are changing like everything else. And that's not a bad thing. But at the core, I can tell you this. All of us are still striving for community. And in every genuine faith community, there will need to be people there who have a calling, not so much to give answers to problems and not so much to solve the riddles and questions of life, but to actually just show up and be present, provide hope, offer grace, and to love in the Spirit of Christ. I guess at its core, that's what I believe pastoring is. And I think it was Peterson who reminded me of that at a time in my life when I really needed it. And for that, I am so very grateful. One final verse from the message from the Psalms. He writes this: be brave, be strong, don't give up, expect God to get here soon. Yeah, that's the word, right? Be brave, be strong, don't you give up, expect God to get here soon. That's hope. That's a message we can all share. Well, I don't know if it's been helpful or not, but next week I'll try to share with you some more of the readings that I've done from Peterson and what they mean to me as a pastor. Take care of yourself. Sorry if I've coughed my way through this. Maybe next week it'll be better. Take care.